alcohol. Alcohol, as we all know, is a legal drink. If you're over 21 years old, you can drink alcohol. But like anything in life, if you abuse it or you misuse it, you can find yourself on the wrong side of the law. One of the basic areas of unlawful conduct when you're talking about alcohol is being drunk in public. And what does that mean? You can drink in your house and you can do and be whatever you want to be. But if you step outside and you're in a public place and an officer sees you and they believe that you are unable to care for yourself, you will be picked up. You will be arrested. And you will likely spend some time in jail. And most people don't understand that because they believe that's some type of area that is their free will. But the law in society says that you cannot be in a place or you cannot be in a state that you're unable to care for yourself, because in the big picture what you're going to probably wind up doing is hurting yourself or somebody else. And that's where the law comes in. The name of the penal code section is Penal Code Section 647F. And you would be surprised at how many people are finding themselves picking up this case. What the law and what the officer is evaluating is whether or not you are drunk or whether or not you can't care for yourself. And what I've seen people tell themselves, what they've gotten into trouble with, is they've gone outside of a bar, of a club, of a restaurant, or even their own neighborhood, believing that they're not drunk. But the subjective part of it is what the officer believes, or what the people who are reporting your behavior believes. If you're arguing with someone, or if you're in a fight, or someone sees you're stumbling, they can report that to a police officer. If that officer comes and evaluates you, and he or she believes that you're not able to care for yourself, then that's when you get arrested. And that's when you have to go to jail. And that's when you wind up in court. And that's when you have to get a public defender or pay a private attorney. And that's when you have to deal with some painful consequences, with some painful financial consequences, and what could eventually make it difficult for you to be employable, or maybe even lose your job. So what are the consequences? What happens if you get a case that says that you're drunk in public? What are the common penalties? And that's another part of this workshop that I'm going to tell you about, because most people don't know. What happens? Well, you will most likely be put on probation. It's a misdemeanor probation, but it's probation nonetheless, which means that you will be subject to an officer searching your car, your property, and your person anytime they contact you, whatever you're doing. You're giving up liberties when you're picking up a case. And when you're being placed on probation, you're giving officers and law enforcement people an opportunity to contact you, to search you, to ask you questions. You're also going to pay a fine, and you may have to do some county jail time. You're going to have to report back to court sometime for a progress report. Sometimes the judge will see fit that you have to do an alcohol program, which in the big picture may be helpful to you. But it will be placing restrictions upon you that you normally would not have to be dealing with if you made these decisions. And these decisions and this judgment that you have to make is understanding that you cannot drink to a point where you can't control yourself, or whether you can't control what people are going to think you may or may not do. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this program trying to lecture you, trying to tell you what to do and what not to do. I'm going to give you the information. I'm going to hope that you make better decisions about what you're going to do. I can't tell you not to drink, because if you're over 21, you're going to do what you want to do. But if I tell you about the consequences of what happens, if I can tell you about the environment when it takes place, then hopefully you can arm yourself with this information and this wisdom to make some good decisions. I've watched people, particularly around college campuses, after a fraternity party, or after a college party, just walking back from your dorm or your apartment, to the campus or from the campus, you are subjecting yourself to being picked up for being drunk in public. If you're at a club in Oakland or a club in San Francisco and you've been there for a while and you've been drinking, sometimes you can get stopped just walking from the club to your car or going to the parking lot, and you can get picked up for being drunk in public. These are those type of scenarios. So do the best you can to try to, one, monitor what you're drinking, making sure you're not drinking to excess, and then making sure you understand that if you're going to be walking in public or doing something in public, give yourself some time to sober up. Give yourself some time to make sure you're in a position that you can care for yourself. Ideally, make sure you don't drink to excess. Make sure you don't drink so that you are in that intoxicated stage. But understand those perimeters and understand what the consequences are. Now that particular area, that particular law, drunk in public, is on the low end of the scale. The next area of law dealing with alcohol is driving under the influence. It's called DUI. Years ago they used to call it DWI. And this is an incredibly painful case to pick up. I've had, over the last year and a half, working as a criminal defense attorney, a number of people who have done what many people do. Had a social drink, gone to a restaurant, maybe even had a drink at home, and decided they were going to drive to the grocery store, whether or not they were going to drive to visit a relative, do a number of things that you may have done before in your life that you think you are able to do even though you've only had maybe one or two drinks. But let me tell you this bit of information and try to understand it and digest it as best you can. You do not know whether or not you're intoxicated. You just can't. You're not a doctor. You can't measure the amount of alcohol in your system. The biggest myth out there for people who pick up these cases and wind up having to come to me or to a public defender to be represented is they believe that they're not drunk. They believe that they're just buzzed. And you can't determine that. You're unable to do that. Your alcohol level is determined by a breath test that measures the amount of alcohol in your system. You cannot live with the belief that I'm okay, that I've done this before. Because I can walk or because I can talk, I'm not intoxicated and I'm not going to get into any trouble. That's the biggest myth. What you got to do and understand is it's better not to drink ever if you're going to drive. And if you're going to drink, you got to drink an incredibly small amount that is, relative to one drink, and that's it. And make sure you have some food in your system so that your food can digest that alcohol. Once again, I'm not lecturing or preaching to you about not drinking, but I'm telling you the circumstances that exist. Because here's the typical scenario. You've had one or two drinks and you think that you're okay. And you're driving from that restaurant, or you're driving from your home, or you're going back to your apartment and you're driving and an officer pulls you over. Now, that officer pulls you over because either you've committed a traffic violation, you're speeding, you're going too slow, or you've got a busted tail light. For some reason, they see fit to pull you over. And then they contact you after they pull you over and they notice you've got the smell of alcohol on you. You've got red eyes, which may be because you're tired or because you've been drinking. And you're normally nervous, but they'll write it down as you having slurred speech. Those are the three factors that an officer looks at: the smell of alcohol, the redness of the eyes, and your ability to speak. Those three things alone, on top of your driving pattern and what they pulled you over for, will get you investigated, will require that officer to have you step out of the car and complete a series of what we call field sobriety tests. So what are field sobriety tests? These are tests that officers and law enforcement have deemed to conclude whether or not you have the proper balance, the proper skills that allow you to drive a vehicle, whether or not you're driving without impairment. That's the word they use. Now, anybody who's ever been through one of these field sobriety tests or talked to people who've been through them, they'll tell you that they want you to do things like stand on one leg, walk a straight line, balance your finger to your nose, do a finger count, finger to thumb to finger to finger to finger. All of these things which most people can do, even if they've had something to drink. But you add that to the fact that you're tired and you may be nervous, it may be cold outside, you're on a pavement, you got to take off your shoes. Most people are not going to perform well on these tests, even if they're sober. So these tests are almost always, in an officer's mind, indicative of you being intoxicated and you being impaired. The next thing they're going to do is have you blow into a breathalyzer test. And on that test, they're going to determine what your blood alcohol level is. Now, in the state of California, if you've got a .08 or more, then you are driving while intoxicated. So you've committed the offense of Vehicle Code Section 23152B, which is driving with a blood alcohol level over .08. And that's all they need. You actually could have been doing well on your field sobriety test. You could have been driving well. But if they put you over and you've got that much alcohol in your system, then you are guilty of driving while intoxicated. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Now, if your blood alcohol level comes back at a level below .08, what they want to determine and consider is whether or not your driving pattern, your ability to balance yourself, suggests that you are impaired to the extent that you can't drive, or you might be able to hurt yourself or someone else. And when that happens, they're going to bring you into custody. They're going into one of the local jails. They're going to keep you there for as long as it takes to process you. They may site release you, which means they let you out on your own, or you may have to stay overnight, sometimes 2 nights before the court can even bring you to court. What you're doing is taking away your freedom and you're giving it to the law enforcement people. You're giving it to the criminal justice system. Because you've made some decisions about drinking and driving, which hopefully now that you've seen and heard this program, you'll make better decisions. So what are those consequences of driving under the influence? You're looking at a minimum 3 years of court probation with the same type of restrictions, search of your person, your property, and your car at any time, any place that an officer feels the need to do so. You're going to have to pay an $1,800 fine. The Department of Motor Vehicles is going to suspend your license. You have to request within 10 days to have a hearing so that they don't do that. But most often in that hearing, if they feel that your blood alcohol level is over the .08 limit, then they're going to suspend your license for at least 4 months. You're not going to be able to drive. And then you're going to have to go to the drink and driving program, which requires you to spend an hour and a half every week going to this program for at least 9 months. And then you're going to get the points taken off of your insurance. Your insurance is going to be higher, and you're going to have to suffer through having this on your record for 7 years. And all the things that come from driving under the influence and picking up a case will also weigh heavy on you. Your ability to keep your job, your ability to get future employment, your ability to have any job that requires driving. What I'm trying to convey to you is that because of these consequences and because of what happens when you pick up this type of case, you put yourself in a position where you're going to have to come through and go through an awful lot of pain, financially, emotionally, and with your family. So that being said, what I tell people oftentimes as well is that if that happens to you and you pick up a driving under the influence case and you have to go to the driving school, then what that is a reality check. It's letting you know that there's something going on with your consumption of alcohol and you've got to go through this painful process. It will be painful, it will cost you some money, but if that's all that's taking place, then you are going to get through it and you're going to be okay. With the proper type of legal advice and someone to help navigate you through the system, you're going to be able to come through it. It's what happens when you're driving that car and you've got alcohol in your system and you wind up running that light, or you're speeding and you jump the curb and you wind up hurting someone in your car. Oftentimes you wind up being in a situation where the person in your car has suffered injuries that has caused that person's death. Or you've run through that life and you've hit that grandmother who's coming home from church. Or you've hit that car with somebody's mother and those 2 kids and they all die. Then your life has just changed. You have gone from whatever you were doing in your life to the worst imaginable nightmare. You're looking at a vehicular homicide. In some cases, you're looking at a voluntary manslaughter. In some cases, depending on how fast you were driving and how reckless you were driving, you're looking at a murder case. I've seen people who lived their lives not even getting a parking ticket, but they believed that they were not intoxicated. They got behind a wheel and they drove, and they wind up getting into an accident that resulted in someone dying. And those people are spending time in prison. Incredibly painful for them to live with the fact that their decisions, their consumption of alcohol and their driving has resulted in someone dying. Oftentimes it's people in your own car, your son, your daughter. You can't imagine a more painful situation to, one, have to deal with the criminal penalties, but also deal with the emotional pain of being responsible for someone's life. What I want you to do with this program is to take stock of the type of place, the type of environment you're in, and the type of decisions you're going to make. When you think about alcohol and you think about this program, think about making decisions ahead of time that are going to allow you to not ever be in this situation. You don't want to get picked up by the police officers. You don't want to be arrested. You don't want your liberties to be taken from you. You don't want your freedom to be taken from you. You don't want to do things that are going to hurt people and yourself. You don't want to find yourself in prison because of drinking. Understand ahead of time. Make the decisions ahead of time. I believe with the proper information and being informed and understanding the consequences of what could happen, you're going to make the right decisions. You're going to do those things that will help keep you out of jail. You're going to do those things that will going to keep you in a healthy place. And I am humbled to be able to share with you this information based on my experiences and training in my 17 years in the criminal justice system and alcohol-related crimes.